Hey everybody, welcome back to the River Youth. We are so glad that you're here and so excited.
Would you start already?
To start us off tonight, I want to go back 12 years to 2009 because tonight our story involves 12 years. So I figured 12 years ago it's a long time ago. It feels like yesterday for myself because of where I was at in life, because I was a senior in high school. In fact, I was probably getting ready for prom at this time of year, going into my senior year, getting ready for graduation and and college stuff and all that kind of stuff. But I want to look at like what was going on at this time of year and just some things that were happening in our culture during 2009. The number one song on the radio at this time of year during 2009 was Right Round by Flo Rida. Yes, Right Round by Flo Rida was the number one song on the radio and the number one movie in the box office, knocking out Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's version of Race to Witch Mountain was a movie called Knowing, starring Nicolas Cage. Apparently, 2009's box office was really in full swing in the middle to late March of 2009. Barack Obama was in his second month ever as president of the United States, and there was a tiny little startup company that was beginning a new experiment. You guys probably have heard of it. It was called Bitcoin, which kicked off in 2009. Michael Jackson was getting ready to enter into his final months of living. In fact, it was just a few months later that we lost the King of Pop. And even stranger than all of that, Taylor Swift was still singing country music because Fearless was the record that she had out at that time. You see, 12 years ago, there was a lot of things that were different. We had a different president. We had different kind of like music on the radio. We had different stuff going on in our culture. And in fact, it may seem like for some of us yesterday, it might seem like forever ago that 2009 was a thing, because 12 years is actually a really long time when you think about it. In fact, when you think about 12 years, for some of us who are tuning in and watching this, 12 years ago, you might not have even been born. Or 12 years ago, you were still a baby walking around. Maybe you were a little one, but more than most likely, for some of our older students, 12 years ago, you were walking into kindergarten and now you're getting ready to exit high school because 12 years is an incredible time. If you think about the time when you turn 12 until 12 years later, I mean, you're out of college, you're done with school, you're working, you're in your career. And when you go from like 24 to 36, then you're old and life just isn't fun anymore. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. But 12 years is a long time. And tonight what I want to do is I want to look at two stories that are kind of like a gigantic pretzel. They both work in their own half, but they meet in the middle and they intertwine in a really cool way. And it involves this idea of 12 years. And the stories begin, and they can be found in Luke chapter 8. Here's what the Bible has to say. On the other side of the lake, the crowds welcomed Jesus because they had been waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. As Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by the crowds. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. Everyone denied it, and Peter said, Master, this whole crowd is pressing up against you. But Jesus said, Someone deliberately touched me, for I felt healing power go out from me. When the woman realized she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him, and that she had immediately been healed. Daughter, he said to her, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. While he was still speaking to her, a messenger arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. He told them, Your daughter is dead. There is no use troubling the teacher now. But when Jesus heard what happened, he said to Jairus, Don't be afraid. Just have faith, and she will be healed. When they arrived at the house, Jesus wouldn't let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, James, and the little girl's father and mother. The house was filled with people weeping and wailing, but he said, Stop the weeping. She isn't dead. She's only asleep. But the crowd laughed at him because they knew that she had died. Then Jesus took her by the hand and said in a loud voice, My child, get up. And at that moment her life returned, and immediately she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were overwhelmed, but Jesus insisted they not tell anyone what had happened. You see, through these stories, we learn something very important, and that is that my confidence in Jesus doesn't change the ability of Jesus. In fact, if you look at both stories, we have two unique stories. The first one has to do with deals with the woman who was bleeding. And through her story, this is one of the takeaways for tonight, is that we learn that confidence can come from suffering. You see, we are introduced to this woman after Jesus is being told by Jairus, hey, come to my house. I have a daughter who is sick and she needs to be healed. He says, let's head there. And you meet this woman who for 12 years has been bleeding. For 12 years, she's had this disease, she's had this condition that has caused this to happen. She's talked to doctors, she's probably consulted everything imaginable, and she is desperate. The best word that I can use is that she is at the end of her rope. 12 years of dealing with this. And this isn't just, important physically because of the condition that she had, but socioeconomically as well. This could have affected her not only as her status as a woman, it could affect her in her status of being able to find a man to take care of her, because that was kind of what was expected of women culturally back in that day. There were a lot of things that came out of this that she probably had to suffer and deal with over the course of 12 years. And she has this idea, maybe if I just touch him, maybe if I just touch Jesus, I'll be healed. Maybe I don't need to talk to him, because who am I? But maybe if I can just touch him, because I've heard stories that this guy heals people. And so it says that she touches the outer portion of his robe, and more than most likely what happened was that she probably touched a tassel that was hanging down by his feet. My guess is that she was reaching out and she's trying and trying and trying. She slips, falls, and she's just able to catch the edge of the robe, the edge of the tassel. Immediately, Jesus stops. And mind you, Jesus, wherever he went, people followed. I've talked before about how crowds would press in on him. So Jesus is probably walking through and they're pushing his way through countless number of individuals. He stops and he says, hey, someone touched me. Of course, everyone probably thinks this is probably one of the dumbest statements that Jesus ever said. They're like, of course somebody's touching you. You're surrounded by people. Jesus says, no. Someone deliberately touched me because I felt power leave me. And he turns and looks, and here's this woman bowing before him. And he says, your faith has made you well. You have this lady who suffered for so long, and she had this confidence about her to say, you know what? I think Jesus can do it. I know and I believe that even if I just touch him, I can be healed. Immediately while this miracle is taking place, immediately as Jesus is talking with this woman, a messenger arrives from Jairus' house and they tell him, your daughter has died. Immediately they tell him, in fact, you don't even have to bother Jesus anymore. But then the story doesn't stop there. And we learn something important about Jesus. Is that, or not about Jesus, but about confidence. We learn something important about confidence. That's that confidence can be lost because of experiences. This guy comes up, he says, Jairus, your daughter is dead. And we know a lot of things to be true about life, but one thing that we know for sure is that dead people don't come back once they die. Jairus is probably destroyed in this moment. Absolutely heartbroken because, like, God, Jesus, we were on our way. He might even be a little angry. What was up with this woman? If it wasn't for her, we could have made it there on time. He's probably a mix of emotions. Jesus looks at him and tells him, Jairus, if you have faith, she will be healed. If you have confidence, she will be healed. They head over to the house. They walk in. There's people crying everywhere. Jesus says, hey, everybody stop crying. She's not dead. She's asleep. They start laughing. Of course. They've been there for a while. They've seen the body. They know that she's dead. Jesus walks in, takes her by the hand and says, little girl, get up. And I imagine she kind of shoots up like, whoo, right? But more most likely her eyes come up. She's like, oh, whatever that breath was like. Maybe it was peaceful. I don't know. But she immediately stands up and Jesus is like, go get her something to eat. Proving that ultimately that she's still her. And that she's capable of doing these things, that her body isn't dead and in fact is capable of continuing to consume, which is incredibly important to be able to get her some energy back. You see, in that story, we have people who gave up. They lost hope. She died. And they were probably thinking, well, the story is over. Well, let's begin the preparations. Let's go bury her. It's all done. And Jesus says, no. Have confidence in me, and she'll be healed. You think Jesus just performed this miracle. And people were probably like, well, I guess it's done. Jesus says, no. I can keep doing this. I can do more than just that miracle. You see, your confidence in Jesus or your doubt in Jesus doesn't change Jesus' ability to be able to heal us and to be able to come into our circumstances, come into our lives, and be able to put a change in our lives. Not depending whatever week or whatever's going on, Jesus can still show up and he can still do things. You have with both of these, you have a story that was 12 years in the making and 12 years just waiting to happen, right? You have this story of this woman and she had been waiting for 12 years, suffering for 12 years, boom, instant. And then you have this girl who's lived 12 years of life, all of which were pointing to this moment and leading into this moment where she was going to die, but Jesus was going to bring her back to life. And I think for some of us, we need to understand that we might be in a 12-year situation. That we're going to suffer and things are going to be hard, and they're going to be hard for a while. But then some of us, we might realize that things might be extremely, brutally tough and hard right now, and they might take away. Either way, no matter what the situation is, it does not hinder or stop God's ability to come in and be able to heal and take care of us. So let's address the two elephants in the room. Maybe you or someone you know has been suffering and struggling for a long period of time. And I just want to say, I'm sorry that you're going through that. I'm sorry that they're going through that. It's never easy. to see someone that we love or someone that we care about suffer in a horrible way. It just isn't. It makes life so incredibly tough. And sometimes I think the last thing that a person wants to hear is that God loves them or God cares about them, because they don't care about God's love. They just want their situation fixed. So I just want to ask a really tough question that we might need to wrestle with and we might need to consider. Is your confidence in God circumstantial? I've had friends, I know people who, when they're in the pit and they're in there, and, their faith, it's on ice, man. Like, it's cracking. They're not sure. They're kind of unwavering or whatever. But when life's good, everything's great. God is so good. God's blessing me. And everything's great. But once that framework begins to crumble, their faith, their confidence begins to crumble. What if God was planning something or working in the situation, and as he's working and he's doing all of this stuff in and amongst your hardship, because of your lack of confidence, you're throwing out him, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater essentially, and you're tossing him out entirely, when maybe he's challenging you to draw nearer to him or to reach out to him and just have that confidence to say, God, yeah, I know this is bad, but we're going to get through this. Let's talk about the second elephant in the room. Maybe you're having a hard time having confidence in God because the situation or situations in your life aren't working out or did not work out the way that you wanted them to. And this can be frustrating. Like, I know a lot of people who love to put like their life and get all their ducks in a row. And it seems like once we get all our ducks in a row, like someone just comes through and just knocks them all off the table and shakes things up. And life it gets crazy, it gets chaotic. And it was like, hey, I didn't even plan for this. I wasn't ready for this. And all that kind of stuff. In fact, we could probably sum it up by just calling it a 2020, right? But is our confidence in God really all about keeping everything status quo and having it turn out my way? Because what if your way, what if the way that we want our lives to turn out sometimes isn't the best thing that God has in store for us? You see, Jairus lost his daughter. But because Jairus lost his daughter, now we have this story that points to the hope and salvation for the world that people have been reading and talking about for thousands of years. And maybe your story, maybe the thing and the circumstances that you're going through right now are ultimately going to point to something bigger, something greater, and something amazing that God has in store for you. We just have to hold out and have faith, have confidence that God knows what he's doing. I know these kind of discussions are never easy. I know they're tough because ultimately at the end of the day, when you look at these stories, it's the stories of people who are suffering, and we go through stuff like this all the time. We know people who suffer. We know people who go through a hard time. But hopefully we can have confidence in the God who has the ability to do whatever we need and whatever will get us through. And let's lean on him during these moments. Let's reach out and touch that outer moment of that robe. Let's try to seize that power that leaves him. And let's trust him while everyone else around us laughs. Okay. Take two. Perfect. This is the blooper that we add at the end.
Right.
Exactly.